elbow. But they clearly cropped out the rest of him because he's not exactly popular in the world right now. But if you look at the White House's version of that very same photo op, it doesn't look like Trump is being awkwardly asked to leave. It looks like he is front and center. He's leading the team in their version of the photo. Now, obviously, Trump trying to pretend the World Cup champions wanted him in their photo, which they clearly did not. It's not the most pressing issue. But it isn't just petty stuff like this that the White House is spinning the facts on. It's also very, very big stuff, as Chris and I were just talking about. I mean, remember how a few weeks ago the New York Times reported that the new $400 million jet Qatar gifted to Trump didn't have the same level of defensive capabilities as the old Air Force One? Remember that? Despite literally switching back to the old Air Force One plane before leaving the NATO summit earlier this month, despite the Secret Service telling reporters on that flight to keep their blinds down for safety, Trump denied to reporters that there were any safety concerns, despite all of that, about the Qatari plane.
So you're saying there wasn't a security concern?
No. Why would
there any other issue?
No.
That was Trump being really, really cagey about the Qatari plane less than 2 weeks ago. And here he was when asked about it just yesterday.
President, this plane does not have anti-missile defense systems.
Well, it has a lot, and it has a lot of capability. But as I understand it, in about a month or so, they're going to send it to have it be maxed out. So they're going to be sending it, and they'll have it be maxed out. It'll take about a month.
That's right. After insisting there were no security concerns, Trump now says the plane is going to be taken out of service so it can be maxed out, as he called it, or upgraded, effectively admitting that the New York Times reporting about the plane's lack of defensive capabilities was probably correct. And what makes that reversal all the more astounding is the fact that the administration has spent the past few weeks not just denying the New York Times reporting about the new plane, but trying to get the journalists behind it to out their sources. I mean, a week and a half ago, federal agents showed up at the homes of the Times reporters who broke that story and served them with subpoenas. And today, we learned that the Trump administration has since sought the phone records of one of the reporters' mothers and two of the reporters' spouses. And believe it or not, it gets even sketchier, because two of the subpoenas sought records dating back to the beginning of the year, way before any reporting about the Qatari jet safety features would have started, which means they're trying to get their sources. They're trying to dig more into who they're talking to in the government. The Justice Department told the Times that all of their subpoenas were issued in full compliance with the federal law and internal department policy. But there is no way that the New York Times is going to burn their sources here. And the Justice Department almost certainly knows that. So what is this really about? The reality here is that the issue was never anything the New York Times reported. Trump wanted to play with his new toy as soon as possible, so it seems like he may have rushed its retrofitting and skipped some of its defensive capabilities in the process. And that became a heck of a lot more dangerous because the war with Iran, which he started, flared up again. Trump doesn't want to admit that, obviously. He'd much rather just blame the Times for reporting the facts here. And there isn't even really about the plane either. It's not really about the plane either, as much as that is a part of the story. Because right now, Trump's war with Iran is the least popular war America has fought since the invention of polling. I mean, that poll from The Economist and YouGov has Trump 30 points underwater when it comes to approval for his war. And as The Economist put it today, it took the war in Vietnam 6 years to become as unpopular as Trump's war with Iran has become in 6 months. We're in day 142 of this war, well past the 60 days that president is allowed to wage a war without the consent of Congress. And last month, both the House and the Senate voted to reject the president's war. Congress can't pass anything these days, Lord knows, but this war is just that unpopular. And now the war is widening because Iran-aligned Houthis in Yemen are attempting a naval blockade of yet another of the world's most crucial oil thoroughfares, the narrow waterway that connects Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea, which you can see on your screen right there, which accounts for the distribution, I should note, of 7% of the world's oil supply. And just to put that in perspective, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has reduced the global oil supply by about 10%.